The Death Railway, the deadliest railway ever built. And it is not even close. During World War II, Imperial Japan needed a supply line from Bangkok to Rangoon after losing control of the sea lanes. The solution? Force roughly 200,000 Asian laborers and over 60,000 Allied prisoners of war to carve 258 miles of track through monsoon jungle in just 16 months, from October 1942 to October 1943. The line crossed 688 bridges, cut through solid rock, and climbed dense mountain passes in temperatures above 100 degrees, with no machinery, only hand tools, bare feet, and starvation rations. The most infamous section, the Konyu Cutting, became known as Hellfire Pass because prisoners worked 18-hour shifts through the night by torchlight, their silhouettes against the rock resembling a vision of hell. Around 700 Allied soldiers died at that single cutting alone. When the last spike was driven, more than 90,000 Asian civilians and roughly 12,000 Allied soldiers had perished. Approximately one death for every single railway sleeper laid across the entire line. Today, only the 77-mile Nong Pla Duc to Nam Tok section remains operational. Hellfire Pass is now a memorial. The bridge on the River Kwai still stands, a monument to the most brutal railway project in human history. Qinghai Tibet Railway, the highest railway on Earth, and every mile above 13,000 feet, is an engineering defiance of nature itself. Stretching 1,215 miles from Scenic to Lhasa, the Qinghai Tibet Railway reaches a peak elevation of 16,640 feet at Tangala Pass, over 200 feet higher than the previous world record held by Peru's Andean Line. Tangala Station, at 16,627 feet, is the highest railway station ever built anywhere on the planet. More than 596 miles of the route sat above 13,000 feet, and roughly 342 miles are laid directly on permafrost, frozen ground that becomes dangerously unstable when it thaws. Engineers solved this with thermosiphon cooling pipes and elevated ventilated roadbeds to keep the ground frozen year-round. The oxygen level at peak altitude runs 35 to 40% below sea level, so every passenger car is pressurized and equipped with individual oxygen outlets at each seat. Construction mobilized roughly 100,000 workers, and the Chinese government reported that not a single one died from altitude sickness, an unprecedented achievement at that elevation. The Golmud to Lhasa section crosses the Kunlun Mountains, which were struck by a magnitude 7.8 earthquake during construction in 2001. The line remains fully operational, carrying tourists and freight into Tibet every day. Devil's Nose. They called it impossible, and the men who proved otherwise paid for it with their lives. The Nares del Diablo is a near-vertical wall of rock in the Ecuadorian Andes, dropping roughly 1,640 feet over just 7.5 miles between the towns of Alausi and Sabambe. The human cost was staggering. An estimated 2,000 workers, many of them Jamaican laborers, died from dynamite explosions, rock slides, tropical disease, and snake bites before the section was completed around 1902. The full line opened on June 25, 1908. Even as a modern tourist attraction, the Devil's Nose proved lethal. In February 2007, 2 passengers were killed when the train snagged a low-hanging cable. The route was closed after devastating El Nino landslides in the 1990s, restored between 2011 and 2013, suspended again in 2020, and finally reopened on August 20, 2025, after a $685,000 restoration. White Pass and Yukon route. Gold made men crazy enough to build it, and 26 months was all it took. During the Klondike Gold Rush, roughly 35,000 workers carved 110 miles of narrow-gauge track from Skagway, Alaska, to Whitehorse, Yukon, between May 1898 and July 1900, using nothing but hand tools, black powder, and 450 tons of explosives. The line climbs from sea level to a summit of 2,865 feet in just 20 miles. Grades reaching 3.9% on 3-foot gauge track blasted into sheer granite cliffs. Workers were lowered on ropes over cliff edges to drill blast holes by hand in temperatures plunging to 60 below zero under constant threat of avalanches and rockfalls. Contractor Michael J. Heaney reportedly boasted, "Give me enough dynamite and snooze, and I'll build you a railroad to hell." Remarkably, only 35 men died during the entire construction, a figure attributed to the use of experienced, voluntary labor rather than forced conscription. The railway operated for over 80 years before collapsing metal prices shut it down in 1982. 6 years later, in 1988, it was reborn as a cruise ship excursion line and now carries hundreds of thousands of passengers every summer through some of the most dramatic mountain scenery in North America. Nilgiri Mountain Railway, India's only rack railway, and the steepest in all of Asia. The Nilgiri Mountain Railway climbs from Mettupalayam at 1,069 feet to Udagamandalam at over 7,200 feet across just 28 miles of track in Tamil Nadu, southern India. Construction began in 1891, the line opened to Kannur in 1899, and the final extension to Ooty was completed in 1908. The maximum gradient hits 1 in 12, that is 8.33%, a slope so steep that no adhesion locomotive on Earth could grip the rails. The solution is the Swiss-Apt rack and pinion system, a toothed rail bolted between the running rails, engaged by a cogwheel under the locomotive that locks the train to the mountain. The line threads through 16 tunnels and crosses 250 bridges over landslide-prone gorges, with 208 curves winding through tea plantations and dense tropical canopy. What makes the Nilgiri truly remarkable is that it still runs century-old Swiss-built X-class steam locomotives. And those engines push rather than pull the carriages uphill, so the locomotive always stays on the downhill side as a failsafe against runaway cars. A UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2005, the Nilgiri remains fully operational, a living museum of Victorian engineering, clinging to one of the most unforgiving mountainsides on Earth. Kuranda Scenic Railway, built to rescue mining towns from total isolation, and dozens of men never came home from the job. Between 1882 and 1891, workers hacked 23 miles of track through the precipitous, barren gorge in tropical North Queensland, Australia, climbing from sea level to 1,076 feet up the McAllister Range. There was no machinery. Every yard was carved by hand, shovels, wheelbarrows, and explosives moving 3 million cubic yards of earth through near-vertical jungle on 45-degree slopes in relentless tropical heat. The route demanded 15 tunnels, all hand-cut through solid rock, dozens of bridges, and 98 curves through some of the densest rainforest on the continent. At least 23 workers are confirmed dead, though estimates run as high as 32, killed by premature blasting, rockfalls, cave-ins, malaria, scrub typhus, and venomous snake bites. The danger never fully left. A rockfall in 1995 shut down part of the line, and a landslide derailment in 2010 damaged it again. The Kuranda Railway now runs through the Wet Tropics World Heritage Rainforest, crossing the spectacular Stony Creek Falls Bridge, a single-span steel arch 128 feet above the creek, and remains one of Australia's most iconic scenic journeys. The men who built it with their bare hands through that gorge are the reason it exists at all. Bernina Express, the highest railway crossing in all of Europe, and it does it without a single cogwheel. The Bernina line climbs from St. Moritz in Switzerland to Tirano in Italy, peaking at 7,392 feet at Ospizio Bernina. And unlike the Nilgiri or most other mountain railways, it relies entirely on adhesion. Gradients reach 7%, among the steepest adhesion grades anywhere in the world, and the full Shur to Tirano route crosses 196 bridges and passes through 55 tunnels. The danger lies in the alpine environment itself. The line runs through active avalanche corridors, and the Rhaetian Railway maintains elaborate barriers and still operates a 1913-era steam rotary snowplow to keep the pass clear during winter. The descent from Alpgrum drops nearly 3,280 feet, in just over 3 miles as the crow flies, achieved through a series of spiral loops and the famous Brusio Circular Viaduct, a 360-degree curve where the train literally crosses over itself. The Bernina Line was built between 1908 and 1910 and designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2008. It runs year-round in every season through some of the most extreme weather conditions any operational railway faces on the planet. Minami-Aso Railway, a railway running through the caldera of Japan's largest active volcano, and the mountain proved that the danger was never theoretical. The Takamori line stretches just 11 miles from Tateno to Takamori in Kumamoto Prefecture, on the southern rim of the massive Mount Aso caldera. Opened in 1928, the line's signature structure is the Daiichi Shirakawa Bridge. At the time of its construction, the highest railway bridge in all of Japan, standing 197 feet above the Shirakawa River. Mount Aso is not a dormant backdrop. It is an active stratovolcano with one of the largest calderas in the world, roughly 15 miles across, and it has erupted dozens of times in recorded history. The real proof of danger came on April 16, 2016, when a magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck Kumamoto and shattered the railway. The Daiichi Shirakawa Arch Bridge was destroyed. The Tateno to Nakamatsu section suffered such catastrophic damage that it remained closed for over 7 years. The entire bridge had to be rebuilt from the ground up before the full line could finally reopen on July 15, 2023. Today, the Minami-Aso Railway operates small diesel trains and a sightseeing open-sided trolley called the Yusuge, carrying passengers directly through the caldera of a volcano that last erupted in October 2021. The mountain is still active and the trains still run.